My name is Harold Bennett. I'm 68 years old, and for 20 of them I've lived alone in this simple house in the quietest part of Lincoln, Nebraska. And when I say alone, it is in the crudest sense that this word can have. Have you ever been forgotten by someone who created with your own hands? I was forgotten by my only son. 20 years of silence. And then, when I got rich, he called me to invite me to Christmas dinner. Maybe you find this curious. Maybe you find it revolting. Or maybe very familiar. Because there are things that we only believe because we feel it in our skin. When a child stops talking to us, we don't forget it, even if we learn to walk with this emptiness in our chest. I know there are people who watch this and think, was I too silly? Is there still time to turn the tide? That's that. If you stay until the end, you will understand what happened the day I knocked on my son's door after 20 Christmases alone. You will see what a silent father is capable of doing. Because love can't be bought, and respect, one does not beg. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know one thing. When I arrived at my son's house on Christmas Eve, he opened the door with that smile that only appears when you expect something valuable. I quietly entered, left my coat on the hanger, and, even before sitting down, looked into his and his wife's eyes and said, I brought a surprise. They froze for a second, then smiled widely like someone who's already counting the money inside. But what I had in that briefcase was not a gift. It was the truth, the whole truth. And when it came to light, their Christmas was never the same again. Now, if you've ever felt like you've been forgotten by those who should value you the most, if a silence of years hurt you more than any words, so this story is also yours. And if it really is, I ask, from the bottom of my heart, that you leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and walk with me through this memory. Telling this is not easy, but maybe, with you there on the other side, I won't feel so alone in this memory. Let's go together. It was a cold December night. I was finishing my tea with my feet covered by a worn blanket when the phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the silence of the house like a knife in glass. In recent years, that phone only rang by mistakes or for pharmacy promotions. I almost let it play until it dropped, but something made me get up, and when I answered, the voice on the other end froze me. Hi, Dad. It took me 2 seconds to understand what I had heard. That word, father. It almost seemed like a provocation after all. It had been 20 years without hearing that voice. No birthday, no Christmas, not even a I'm alive. And now, out of nowhere, he called. The voice was his, yes. Caleb. But it came with a casual, almost rehearsed tone, as if we had lunch together yesterday. Dad, I know. It's strange. But Rachel and I, we were talking, and we thought maybe you could come over to dinner with us for Christmas. Nothing much, just family together, you know. I was silent for a moment. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Family reunited? 20 years without even a card. Not even when I operated on my heart 4 winters ago. Not even when the neighbor died and he found out, and even then he didn't care. But now, with his name stamped in the newspaper as the man who took $15 million from the state lottery, now there was time to gather the family. Caleb, this is unexpected. I know. It's been a long time, but we feel that it is time to start over. Life is short, right? And Rachel makes a point of seeing you. Ah, Rachel. The same one who blocked my messages when I tried to send a gift to my grandson. The same one who said that it was better for everyone if I didn't show up by surprise. I held on. I took a deep breath. Right. And where is this dinner? He gave me the address as if it were an invitation to a picnic. Lincoln Hills. One of those new neighborhoods where the sidewalks are wide and everyone has a white fence and matching curtain. The kind of life I never had, and that he only knew because he chose another side in the story. We'll be waiting for you on Christmas Eve. It will be special. Oh, and Dad. It brings your joy, huh? It's been a while since I've seen you smile. I smiled. Yes, but inside. That phrase hit me like a stone. And yet, I stood firm. Sure, Caleb. And you? Be ready. I'm also going to get a surprise. There was a pause on the other side. Those that last half a second but deliver what the mouth has not yet had the courage to say. A surprise? Yes. Something that I prepared very carefully. His voice lit up in disguised enthusiasm. Oh, that's cool. It's going to be great, Dad. Turned off. I looked at the phone for a few seconds, feeling the heat of the device against my cold hand. That call seemed like what I had been waiting for 2 decades, but it was something else. I felt it deep in my chest. It was not a reunion. It was an opportunity, and I knew exactly why it had come about now. I stopped right there in the kitchen with the cup still half full and put my hands on the countertop. Her eyes began to burn, not anger, but of observation. So many years, so many apologies that never came, so many Christmases alone, and it was enough for me to become a millionaire, for my name to exist again in my son's life. No, there are things that we swallow quietly, but don't forget, it's like dust under the rug. No one sees it, but it's there slowly suffocating. And one day the wind comes in, and it lifts everything. At this point in life, we no longer want revenge. He wants justice and dignity. Pause briefly here, my friend, who listens to me. If you've ever been through something like this, if you've ever felt that pinch of being remembered only when you have something to offer, comment below with an I believe or a I've lived it. Because knowing that there are more people who understand this pain makes us feel less alone in the world. That night I didn't sleep. I sat staring at nothing, with my head full of memories and questions. But in the midst of the silence, a certainty settled in me like burning embers. I would no longer be the man who asked for a place in anyone's life, especially in the life of those who erased me for 20 years. And it was there, on that freezing Nebraska dawn, that the plan began to take shape. It was not a plan of anger, nor for revenge. It was something more subtle, thinner. I was going to accept the invitation. I would go to that new house, full of Christmas lights and people who no longer knew me. And it was going to take, yes, a surprise, but not the one they expected. Now, what was really inside that folder? And how can a simple phrase said at the right time turn an entire Christmas upside down? Wait for me in the next part, because that's when everything starts to change. After that phone call, when the silence of the house took over everything again, I went to the bookshelf and pulled out an old box, made of thick cardboard, which I keep in the back of the closet. Inside there are memories that don't fit in the soul, and that we keep on paper so we don't go crazy. Letters that were never answered, yellowed photos, a graduation invitation that I received without dedication, and there, in the middle of it all, a photograph of the day Evelyn left me. She with her bags packed, Caleb standing next to her, arms crossed. I was still smiling in the photo. Crooked smile, of someone who did not understand what was happening. Evelyn left after 25 years of marriage. He said he needed a real man, someone who knew how to build the future. He was referring to James, of course, that executive full of figures and expensive suits, who showed up at the school's parents' conferences as if he were a hero. Evelyn said that I thought small, that she got tired of seeing me fixing things with duct tape and dreaming of free time. You grew old early, Harold. I remember her saying this in the kitchen while folding the last towel. But what hurt the most, it was Caleb. At the time he was 17. He was almost a man. And when I asked, in a trembling voice, if he wanted to be with me, he didn't even look me in the eye. She only replied, "I'm going with Mom. James inspires me." And then they left, without looking back. The house was in a silence that I had never known before. It was as if everything there had died. The paintings, the carpets, even the smell of Evelyn. Everything went away that afternoon. For the first few months I tried to keep in touch. I got their new address in Springfield, wrote letters full of affection, full of hope. I sent Caleb books, notes, even pictures of me with the dog he adored, Toby. But nothing came back. Not a thank you. Then I found out that Evelyn blocked all attempts. Once I called and she answered. Before I could say anything, she said, "Stop playing the victim, Harold, you've already lost." And he hung up. It was there that I realized this was not a divorce. It was an erasure, an exile. Caleb never answered a single letter. He never called me at Christmas, not even on the day I turned 60. I knew he was growing up, that he had entered college, that he was trying to start a business. But all this I discovered by third parties. By chance. Never for him. It was as if my name had been wiped off the map of his life. And yet, I kept waiting. Every December, I would set up a small tree, put 2 socks on the fireplace, one with the letter C and one with the letter H. It was ridiculous, I know, but it was all I had left. Sometimes he left wrapped gifts, which ended up going to donation months later. Time passed. 20 years have been piling up on the shelves of my silence. And each year, instead of erasing the pain, it took deeper roots. That night, with the box in my lap, I realized that I had never really understood how I lost everything. Evelyn took the house, the car, even the dog. Caleb took my pride, respect, the image I had of myself. When a son looks at you and says that another man is more worthy of admiration, you don't just lose him, you lose yourself. I spent many years trying to fix myself inside, trying to convince myself that maybe I deserved it, that I was a flawed father, an absent husband. But the truth is that I was never cruel. I have never been silent. I was always there. It just wasn't bright. And it seems that nowadays, this is not enough. And now, after 20 years invisible, I am called to Christmas. Not because they missed me, but because I became a newspaper headline. Because my bank account grew, not for who I am, but for how much I have. But what does Caleb really expect to find when he opens the door? The father he rejected, or the millionaire he thinks he can use? One thing I already knew, he wasn't ready for the answer that would come. And this answer, it was already on its way. There are people who think I got rich by luck, that I was a lucky old man with a magic note. But the truth, my friend, it's just that I was already rich even before that number appeared on the screen. He just wasn't the kind of wealth that makes noise. It was in silence and abandonment that I began to build everything. After Evelyn walked out that door and took away half of everything we had, including the respect I had for myself, I spent a good few years in the dark. But there, between pain and contempt, a discipline was born that I didn't even know lived in me. I read it. He read as if breathing. I studied investments while eating cereal, while heating soup, while the world ignored me. I learned about compound interest, real estate funds, and I started slowly, buying an old house, painting with my own hands, fixing the faucets with YouTube videos. Then he rented it. With the profit, he bought another one. He would reform again, always alone. I never needed anyone else. In 2008, when the country plunged into crisis and many people panicked, I saw an opportunity. I bought 3 properties for pennies on the dollar. It took me years to get each one up. He painted at night, sanded wood in the cold. I swept the rubble myself. While Caleb attended fraternity parties, I carried bags of cement. While he posted photos smiling with friends, I spent late nights organizing receipts, contracts, learning how to make my money work. I never had luxury. I lived for almost 20 years in a rented townhouse, simple, but clean, organized. I drove the same Ford Fusion for more than a decade. No one knew that. Behind that man with shabby clothes and calm steps, there was a network of real estate spread throughout the state. When 2023 arrived, my net worth was already over 7 figures. And then, on any given day, between a bag of bread and a can of beans, I bought the lottery ticket at Casey's just because I had a few bucks left. And I won. 15 million. The whole city talked about it. My name came out in the newspapers. The neighbors who never said good morning to me began to smile as if they knew me. And, of course, 3 weeks later, Caleb reappeared. But what he didn't know, and maybe never imagined, is that winning ticket didn't change my life. He just confirmed it. I was already a complete man. With scars? Yes, but whole. I had already learned to be alone without being bitter. He had already built an empire without making a sound. Everything that Evelyn said I would never be, I became. A capable man, strong, stable, and fair. I became what my son never wanted to see, and maybe now he would be forced to see, but what he didn't know yet. It's just that I wasn't going to that dinner as a needy father. I was going as a prepared man, and what would I take with me? It was going to change the course of that Christmas forever. But would he be ready to hear the truth he buried for 2 decades? A few days after that Christmas invitation call, I looked deep inside myself and thought, does he want me there? Or does he want something else? Because there are things that are only understood when we test them, and that's what I did. I picked up the phone again, called Caleb, and, in the most tired voice I could, said like someone who carries the world on his back, "Son, I need to tell you something. That lottery money, I tried to invest in cryptocurrencies. I entered a business with an advisor who seemed trustworthy, but I lost almost everything. On the other end of the line, silence. A couple of seconds that seemed eternal. Then he coughed, cleared his throat as if looking for the right words not to say what he wants, and he said, 'Wow, Dad, what a pity. I don't even know what to say. The tone of his voice was no longer animated. It was neutral, calculated. An uncomfortable silence extended until he added, "Well, maybe with all this confusion it's not the best time for our dinner. Rachel is nervous, you know how it is. Oliver also has the flu. Who knows? Maybe after the holidays we'll schedule more calmly." That hit me like a closed door, but it didn't hurt, he only confirmed it. That's what I needed to hear. That was not a reunion, it was interest. And without money, the father was invisible again. I hung up the phone slowly. I stared at the device as if watching an old wound open again, only this time without bleeding. It was as if my heart said, "See? You didn't imagine." It was true. And there, sitting in that kitchen chair, with the yellowish light over me, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I felt a strange peace, as if finally, I had closed an unresolved chapter of my life. Now, if you've been listening to me this far, let me ask you something with an open heart. I'm here opening my chest, sharing this story that has been with me for 20 years. If you're on the other side and you're feeling it with me, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. It's not for numbers nor for vanity. It's just so I know there's someone there, really listening, because telling it all alone weighs. But with you there, it gets lighter. After that call, I didn't cry. I didn't even rebel. I just went to the bookshelf, picked up a notebook where I write down my important decisions and wrote, "Caleb doesn't want his dad. He wants the bank account. Clear mission, to show the truth." I closed the notebook. I stood up, and I went to prepare the next call. But before I tell you what happened when I called him again, tell me, how do you think he reacted when he learned that I had recovered part of the money? You won't believe what he said. The morning after that embarrassing phone call, I sat in my armchair with the black briefcase on my lap. It was old, made of thick leather, with a metal clasp already worn out by the years. I used it when I was an accountant. I took a lot of important documents in there. But that day, what I kept there was more than paper. It was the truth that has been silent for too long. I opened the folder calmly, like someone who opens an old wound that needs to be cleaned before it heals. Inside, no checks, no promise of inheritance, only proofs. Cold, calculated, emotionless tests. The first was a series of screenshots I printed from Caleb's Instagram account. Those photos he took in front of cars that weren't his, trips that looked luxurious, but paid for with money from investors who trusted his edtech startup, a company that in 4 years has not delivered a single product. There were also PDFs of silent lawsuits, hidden lawsuits, out-of-court settlements paid for, with the little he still managed to keep standing. Among the papers, one testimony cut my soul, that of a 68-year-old Gulf War veteran who invested $50,000, all of his life savings, because he believed that the Exemplary Sons Company would change the education of underprivileged young people. He lost everything. He was never able to start over. When I read that for the first time, it gave me a lump in my throat. But now, when I reread it, I only felt firm. I couldn't fix what Caleb destroyed, but it could show what he tried to hide. I organized everything in chronological order. I also attached a copy of the shell contracts, the list of fake addresses used on the websites, and finally a separate folder, with Evelyn's name on it. This one was more difficult to put together. After all, she was the woman I slept with for more than 2 decades, the mother of my son. But justice does not choose who will hurt. I found out that she was now living in Portland, in a modest house, asking for donations online. He said he had cancer. He showed photos with headscarves, emotional videos asking for help to pay for the treatment. But I know people. I know systems. And with a little conversation and the right documents, I found out that she was never diagnosed with anything serious. Her name was not on any cancer center in the city. No plug, no treatment, all staged. And the cruelest thing, part of the money she said she needed for chemotherapy, it was spent on hotel reservations and aesthetic clinics. I separated all of that, but not angry. Accurately, this was not revenge. It was silent justice. They spent their entire lives creating versions of themselves that didn't exist. The absent father, the failed husband, the bitter old man. Well, now I would show them the true version of me, the one I built in silence, the one that no one saw coming. I closed the folder firmly, I felt the leather creak between my fingers. I looked out the window. The snow was slowly beginning to fall on the yard. Each flake seemed like a reminder. Time erases footprints, but not truths. I got up from the armchair, grabbed my coat, and put the briefcase next to the door. I didn't say anything, not even for myself. But in that gesture, in that silence, I knew it. The plan had begun. And when the doorbell of that house rings on Christmas Eve, will they be ready for who will really come in? Because it won't be the herald of the past. It will be the man they never wanted to meet. 4 days have passed since that disguised disinvitation. I was silent. Not another message, not a sign of hurt. Sometimes silence teaches more than any sermon. And then, as the kitchen clock struck 9:21 a.m. on a freezing Wednesday, I dialed Caleb's number again. He answered with a quick, hello, kind of surprised. I gave a slight cough before starting to speak, as if I was still recovering from the fall. Son, I just wanted to update you on that financial mess. There was a twist here. I was able to recover a considerable part of the money. An old investor contacted me and bought me some assets for a good amount. Nothing like before, of course, but I'm stable again. The silence lasted a second and a half. Then, as if by magic, his voice transformed. It has a shine again. He had again heat. Wow, Dad. How great. What wonderful news. I'm really happy, seriously. Rachel will love to know that. She was even sad about everything that happened. But now, look, it seems that everything is aligning. By the way, our dinner here at home is still standing. We really want to see you. And there in the background of the call, I heard her voice, soft and slurred as caramel, trying to sound welcoming. Harold, what a joy to hear your voice. It will be wonderful to have you here with us. We are preparing everything with care. The kids are excited, see? The children. What children? I didn't even know my own grandchildren well. I never received a single photo, not a scribble on paper. But now, all of a sudden, I was Grandpa Dear. I swallowed hard and kept my tone cordial. I'm happy. I look forward to meeting you all again. It will be a special night. And look, I'm going to be surprised. Something that I prepared very carefully. On the other end of the line, silence, followed by a light laugh, one of those who try to hide the expectation. Ah, Dad, you and your surprises. It's going to be an unforgettable Christmas. I knew it would be, but not in the way they imagined. Caleb's voice trembled with suppressed enthusiasm. Soon after, as if trying to talk casually about something very rehearsed, he commented, in fact, I'm working on a new idea, an application for school management. Big thing, Dad. It has a lot of potential. We only have some financing obstacles, but nothing much. We thought about presenting the proposal to some investors after the holidays. Who knows, maybe we can talk about it. I smiled to myself. There it came. The disguised request. The old, unmissable opportunity trick. Rachel, in turn, released the missing line. And, you know, Harold, taking advantage of the fact that you are reorganizing your finances, we also wanted to talk about a pending issue here in the house. An unexpected rate in financing. Small thing, but it's tightening. We would explain it better in person, of course. Take it easy. It was as if each sentence was a bait thrown into the river. They were sure that the big fish had returned, that the old fool Lincoln, now a millionaire again, would come with an open pocket and a soft heart. But little did they know that I wasn't coming back with gifts. I was coming back with a mirror, and what they would see there, and perhaps it would be tougher than any no. And there's one thing I need to say now, looking at you who are following me here. As much as everything seems clear, there's still a lot to come. The most remarkable moment in this story, it hasn't happened yet. So stay with me, because what I'm going to tell you later, no one will soon forget. We said goodbye with rehearsed phrases. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a blessing. We're excited. They didn't know they were setting up a party for a man who was no longer theirs. And that night, the Christmas table would have more than food. It would have truths. But will they have the stomach to swallow what I'm going to serve? Christmas Eve arrived with a biting blue sky and fine snow covering the sidewalks of Lincoln Hills like a sheet of pretense. I took it slow, driving the same Ford Fusion that had accompanied me through so many winters, with the black briefcase on the passenger seat, as if it were an old companion. As I rounded the last corner, I saw Caleb's house, huge, illuminated as if competing with the sky itself. Too many lights for such little truth. It was one of those houses that scream status but whisper debt. I parked on the street, even with the free space in the garage. I didn't want to settle too much. I rang the doorbell twice. The door opened with an almost rehearsed speed, and there he was, Caleb, with that wide smile, too open, a smile that hadn't seen my face for 20 years but now tried to look intimate. He pulled me into a hug, theatrical, cold on the inside, warm on the outside. I reciprocated lightly as if embracing a shadow. "Dad, what a joy to see you," he said, as if it were routine. Rachel appeared right behind, with a dress that was too expensive, impeccable makeup, the teary eyes, but I don't know if it was emotion or eye drops. He gave me 2 kisses on the cheek, shook my hands with the strength of someone who wants to convince, and said, "You can't imagine how much we dream of this moment." And there, next to the stairs, the boy appeared, Oliver, 10 years, shy, holding a tablet against his chest as a shield. His eyes were the only ones that looked at me without a filter. He didn't hug me. He only waved his hand, and it was enough for me to feel a lump form in my throat. The house was beautiful, yes, but too beautiful. Furniture that didn't match everyday life. Decoration items still smell like a store. Artificial flowers in pots that tried to look expensive. It was all set up. Rented furniture, cutlery that only comes out of the box when there is someone to impress. And there I am, walking slowly, noticing everything with the eyes of someone who has lived long enough to know when a house speaks the truth, and when she just pretends. We sat down at the table. The turkey was large, the side dishes varied, everything carefully exposed, as in a magazine. But what really caught my attention was the care taken with the cutlery. Genuine silver, polished with exaggeration, laid out as if each one were a museum piece. I sat down at the bedside, a symbolic gesture. Rachel insisted. Caleb reinforced. "The night is yours, Dad. The house is yours." But it all sounded like a badly staged play. Dinner began, and along with it, the choreographed dialogues. "We've been thinking a lot about the future, haven't we, Rachel?" said Caleb with a grin in his teeth. "Yes, especially with so many opportunities appearing. And with you now so well-positioned, Harold. We think we can walk together, you know," she added, with that tone of someone who asks without saying the word help. And between one sip of wine and another came the phrases poisoned with sweetness. "Oliver deserves stability. You worked so hard, Dad. Maybe now is the time to think about the legacy. We know you must be organizing your heritage." I heard everything, every word, each intention disguised as affection, and I remained there, silent, with my fork in hand, eating slowly, chewing their words more than the food on the plate, because in that theater, I was the only one who knew the entire script. And you know, there is a moment when we realize that time has not erased the pain. He only taught him to be silent until the right time, and that time was coming, because sometimes, everything we want, it is that the other reveals himself without realizing it. And when that happens, the mask no longer fits. You know, now that I'm remembering this, something came to my chest. Maybe you've also experienced a Christmas where you felt like a stranger at a table that was supposed to be yours. If you've been through this, comment here with a "I know how it is," or an "I understand you." Sometimes, just knowing that someone on the other side has already felt it, we feel less alone. Dessert has arrived. Apple pie with cinnamon, served with fake smiles and spoonfuls of hope. Caleb served me as if he were feeding a bank. Rachel smiled with her gaze fixed on my briefcase next to the chair. It was then that I took a deep breath, wiped my lips with the linen napkin, and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Before we cut the cake, I brought something special, a little surprise that I prepared with care." Their eyes lit up. Caleb sat in his chair, Rachel resting her hands on the table, anxious. Oliver, still quiet, just watched. And then, I got up. I walked slowly to the armchair and opened the folder. But what did they see there? Inside that black leather, what made that Christmas never be the same again? I opened the folder with the same calmness as someone who had seen the last page of a heavy book. Inside, 2 other smaller brown paper folders, each with a name written in pen, Caleb and Rachel. I handed one to each one without saying anything. They looked at each other, still with that glint of expectation in their eyes. Do you know when the person thinks they are going to receive a check and opens the envelope smiling? That was more or less it. But the smile, it didn't last long. Rachel was the first to open, and as her eyes scanned the first few pages, her face grew harder. First, a crease on the forehead. Then, the jaw locked. Caleb, on the other hand, hesitated. He held the briefcase in his hands for a few seconds until, with trembling fingers, he began to flip through it. Inside were copies of the silent processes, the front contracts, the private investigation reports, the evidence that his EdTech startup was nothing more than a mismanaged fantasy, and at times an active fraud. There were investor testimonials, emails with false promises, photos of events where he posed as a visionary CEO while money evaporated on trips and dinners. Rachel turned the next page and came across Evelyn's records, the fake profile on the donation site, the proof that she used the money at spas and clinics, and the medical report that proved she was never diagnosed with cancer. It was a cruel staging, sustained with the same coldness with which she destroyed my name in the past. "What's that?" Rachel asked, already without a smile. Her voice came out rough, between surprise and threat. I just looked into the eyes of the two and replied, "Your inheritance." The silence was absolute. The sound of the spoon hitting the saucer in the distance, the crackling of the wood in the fireplace. Everything seemed frozen. Caleb was still trying to understand what he was reading. He passed the sheets in a hurry, looking for some explanation. Rachel closed the briefcase abruptly. "You set all this up, didn't you?" She spat, her eyes now filled with rage. "You came here just to humiliate us." I didn't react. I continued to sit with my hands on my knees, watching. It was like watching two characters discovering, live, that they were not the protagonists of their own farce. Caleb stammered justifications. "This information is partial. This is all a misunderstanding. Father, listen to me." But there was nothing more to hear. I spent 20 years listening. Now it was time to show it. "For years," I said, standing up calmly, "you have told a story. One where I was the weak man, the absent father, the failed husband. Meanwhile, you have created pretend castles on yourself. Scams, deceptions, manipulations. All this protected by smiles and family photos. Well, the only thing I brought today, it was a mirror." I went to the chair, took my coat and put it on carefully. Rachel no longer spoke. He was motionless, staring at the briefcase as if it were burning in his hands. Caleb looked like a lost boy, sweating cold in his dress shirt. "Thank you for the supper," I said as I walked to the door. "I hope this material helps you to reflect. Anyway, family is about truth, not about money." And before leaving, I turned and looked at the only one who still stared at me with clean eyes. Oliver. The boy said nothing. He just looked at me, curious, confused, but present. I closed the door behind me without looking back. The snow was falling harder now, and I felt in my chest something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. But what happened after the door closed? You can't imagine who looked for me days later, and what he said. I drove home slowly, wipers clearing the fine snow on the windshield and the radio turned off. I didn't even need music. Silence was enough for me. It was one of those silences that do not weigh him down. On the contrary, release. When I got home, I hung up my coat, left the briefcase on the kitchen table and served a coffee. Strong, bitter, just the way I like it. I sat in the armchair and stayed there, looking out the window, as if waiting for time to pass with dignity. I didn't think about revenge. I didn't feel triumphed. Felt end, a kind of end that does not destroy, but cleanses, a cleaning of the soul. I slept early that night. Lightweight body, firm heart, but on the other side of town. The atmosphere was different. I later learned from neighbors, acquaintances, and even from a message that escaped through the networks that what happened in that house after the door closed, it was a real storm. Rachel freaked out. He threw the dessert on the floor. He shouted, "You promised he didn't know anything. You swore he was just a needy, lost old man." Caleb tried to calm down, saying that he would find a way, that it wouldn't change anything. But it was too late. The truth was there on every sheet I handed in, on every line of every process. The mirror was before them, and they hated the reflection. That morning, Caleb tried to call me. Twice. I didn't answer. He sent a short message. "Dad, we need to talk, please." Deleted. Then came another. "You don't understand. We can solve this." I blacked out too. Sometimes the best we can do for someone, it is to leave it with its own silence. The next morning, I woke up as early as usual. I went for a walk to the park, fed the squirrels as I did every winter. When I returned, I opened the computer to read the news. And there it was. Caleb's social networks. Flooded. Comments from investors demanding explanations. Questions about the products promised and never delivered. Prints of the ostentatious photos being reposted with ironic captions. Our money? This car was rented, right? His name circulated in forums, pages of complaints. The picture castle he built began to crumble. It was then that the landline at my house rang. It was a number with a prefix of Portland. Answered. The voice on the other side. Sharp. You ruined it, Harold. Everything. It's your fault. They're removing my campaigns. There are people asking for reimbursement. People threatening me. Do you know what you did? It was Evelyn. The same Evelyn who 20 years ago spat on my dignity. Now, screaming, he blamed the truth for his fall. I never looked for you. I never asked for anything. I just showed you what you built yourself, I replied. She screamed a few more things which I don't even remember. Then he hung up. The sound of the beep on the earphone remained in the air for a while, like a last silent scream. I got up, went to the kitchen and washed my cup. And in that simple gesture, I realized I had nothing more of them in me, nor sorrow, nor fear, nor anger. And if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward? Like and subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think, because if there's one thing I've learned, it's just that when we break the silence with truth, someone out there also finds the courage to speak. But there was still something I didn't expect. A visit. A request. It's a question that dismantled me inside. Do you know who it was? You will understand, and maybe get emotional. After that supper, I knew that my presence there had been only the first step. The hardest, yes, but not the last. I returned home in silence and, the next day, I fulfilled what was already ready. I sent the complete dossiers, organized with surgical precision, to 3 different places. The first was for the lawyers of 2 investors who I knew had been the most harmed by Caleb. I didn't have to explain too much. The evidence spoke for itself. The second destination was the Oregon Medical and Tax Authorities, with all the documents and inconsistencies involving Evelyn. And finally, the third digital envelope went to 2 local journalists, serious people who I had been following for years and who always sought the truth even when it bothered me. I didn't put my name on anything. I used only what was already public, with a small anonymous letter asking them to investigate. I made sure to disappear soon after. No interviews. No recognition. Real justice does not need applause. The first headlines began to emerge 3 days later. Caleb's photo appeared in an article in the local newspaper with the title, "Lincoln Startup is Investigated for Millionaire Fraud." The text explained how dozens of people had invested in a project that never got off the ground, while the owners traveled and showed off luxury on the networks. Rachel was cited as a managing partner of the company. The next day, the school where she worked issued an official statement saying that she was being removed for internal reasons. Their social networks were invaded by comments, not cheap hate, but demands. Ordinary people like you and me asking for explanations. One of the investors publicly shared an excerpt from an email where Caleb promised double the return in 6 months. Everything was falling apart. Fast. On Evelyn's side, the noise was even louder. The story of the woman with cancer who deceived the online community hit the news portals in Portland with force. The donation platform blocked her profile and froze the funds. A subpoena was delivered 2 days later, demanding clarification and presentation of medical reports. I received anonymously a copy of the notice of judicial appearance. On it, her name was in large letters, and well below, the date of the testimony. I took a deep breath when I saw it. The truth sometimes is slow, but when it arrives, it steps firmly. And while all this was happening, I was still here, walking through the park, reading my books in the library, drinking coffee on the porch. My name didn't appear anywhere. No quote, no rumors. Like a ghost. Present, but invisible. Not because I wanted to run away, but because what I did wasn't about me. It was about what was right. You know, there are people who think that justice is noise, who needs to scream, appear, hurt. But for me, true justice is like the winter wind. You don't see, but he does. It passes, touches, transforms, and sometimes cleans what has been covered up for a long time. And look, if you've come this far with me, know that there's still something that needs to be told. Because as much as all this has brought peace, the most human part was yet to come. A part that does not involve a court or a headline. But yes, forgiveness. Or perhaps what's left of it. Can you imagine who knocked on my door a few days later? And what did he carry in his hands? It arrived like an uncontrolled wind. The door to Caleb's house hadn't even closed properly after the mail was delivered when Evelyn appeared on the threshold, her rolling suitcase being dragged tightly, her wool coat open, her hair disheveled, and her eyes bloodshot with anger. "Where is he?" were the first words. Not a good morning, not a mother's gesture. Only the sharp tone of those who came to charge. Caleb, still in his pajamas, barely had time to process. Evelyn already pushed in, looking around as if she expected to find me there, sitting with a cigar in her hand. But I wasn't, and that only seemed to make her more nervous. "You let him do this to us," he shouted. "You've had 20 years to erase traces, Caleb. 20. How did this old man gain access to my records? How did he find out everything?" Rachel walked down the stairs, slowly, pale. By this time she had already lost her job, her social invitations, and she was beginning to realize that there was not enough containment plan to save the image they had built with so many lies. Evelyn turned to her too. "And you? Were you sleeping when he recorded everything? You let him come in here, look us in the eyes, and serve us this poison on porcelain plates." Caleb tried to calm his mother by pulling her into the kitchen, but Evelyn was possessed. He began to pace, mumbling one shot after another. "Let's make a video. You and Rachel holding hands, explaining that you were deceived by a partner, that they knew nothing. I show up at the end, with a scarf on my head, crying. We will appeal. People forgive what is human, Caleb. We just need to look human for a few days." It was there, in the corner of the kitchen, with the morning light beating through the window and reflecting off the icy floor, that Caleb sank his shoulders. For the first time in years, he didn't speak. He only stared into the void. When he finally opened his mouth, his voice came out like a whisper, without force. "We spent 20 years lying to everyone, Mom, including myself." Rachel sat down. He lowered his head. Evelyn laughed disdainfully. "So now you're going to play the enlightened? After everything we've done to keep up appearances?" "That's what I'm tired of appearances," Caleb replied. "We built a wind castle. And he, my father, he didn't scream, he didn't expose me on national television, it showed who we are." There was a dry silence after that, of those who hurt. Evelyn approached him and said in a low, cruel voice, "You are weak." Just like his father he always was. But at that moment something broke inside Caleb. A type of resistance that was maintained out of pride, fear, or simple habit. For the first time, he did not react with anger. He did not try to explain himself. He just looked at his mother and in a tone that sounded more like grief than anger said, "Maybe he was never the weak one in this story. Sometimes, a simple sentence carries more weight than years of silence." And this was one of them. And look, I wasn't there to see it, but when they told me later, I kept looking at my cup of coffee and felt that lump in my throat that only time knows how to form. Because, you see, there are memories that stick in us like small thorns. Moments that pass in silence but are kept forever. Do you have any memories like that? Any memory that shaped you, shook you, or taught you something that no one else has seen? If you do, share it here in the comments. Sometimes digging up a memory is the first step to healing what has been hidden. But let me tell you, what happened in the following days? It wasn't in anyone's plans, because when the truth begins to spread, it takes with it what is left of lies. And someone who never spoke, he decided to knock on my door. But it wasn't who you're thinking. You will understand why. The snow was falling thin that evening, covering the trails of Holmes Lake like a sheet of silence. I liked to walk there when the world got too noisy, and in the last few days he had made a noise that echoed even inside his soul. I took with me a yellowed envelope, folded at the ends with a handwriting of mine that I don't even recognize well. The date in the upper left corner read December 24th, 2006. It had been a long time. It was the first Christmas I'd spent alone, after Caleb moved to Springfield with his mother. I wrote that letter with trembling hands and a broken heart. At the time, I thought that a letter could heal the gulf that was growing between us, but I never had the courage to send it. Kept, folded at the bottom of a box, forgotten among retirement papers. old photos and expired receipts. I sat on a wooden bench near the frozen water. I took off my gloves, opened the envelope, and started reading. The handwriting was mine, but it sounded like another man's. A more broken man, more hopeful. The words trembled. Caleb, my son, today is Christmas Eve. The house is silent and only the wall clock keeps me company. I remember you, little one, running down the hallway barefoot, screaming that Santa Claus had left footprints in the snow. I miss you, son, not because I'm old and lonely, but because I'm a father, and the absence of a child is nothing like anything. The following lines spoke of my regret, of how I wondered if I could have done more, if I should have fought harder for the guard, if I had screamed louder when Evelyn painted me as useless. I accepted quietly, Caleb, because I thought that if I kept quiet, love would live on in you. But the silence only brought me more silence. It seemed that that letter had been written yesterday, because the pain she carried was still here, no longer with the same weight, but with the same format. I continued reading. I don't expect you to come back tomorrow, not even next Christmas. I just want you to know that, even far away, even without an answer, I am still your father. I still love you, even when everything tells me to give up. I closed my eyes after that. I held the paper for a while, letting the wind touch my fingers. And there, with the frozen lake in front of me and my feet already tingling with cold, I understood. This letter was not for Caleb today. It was for the man I went. To Harold, who still believed that love was enough, and that man had already done its part. I returned home before nightfall. I lit the fireplace, sat in the armchair with a blanket over my legs and stared at the fire for a while. Then I got up slowly, took the letter, and I threw myself through the flames. The words danced, writhed, disappeared, and with them, a part of the weight I carried. No, there are things in life that we no longer need to explain. Just feel, accept, and leave it behind. Not every bond needs to be reconnected, but some need to be understood before burning. That night I slept early, for the first time in many years, without expecting a response, without waiting for an apology. I just wanted peace, and it came slowly, like the snow falling outside. But the world sometimes takes strange turns, because the next day, the doorbell rang, and on the other side of the door, there was someone I never expected to see there, and he didn't come empty-handed. It was a cold morning when the news came out in the Lincoln Journal-Star. Firm, blunt headline: Evelyn Chambers charged with fraud and misappropriation after faking illness to obtain donations. Her photo, aged, tired, was on the front page. They said that she tried to claim a fragile emotional state, deep depression, mental confusion, but the medical record said otherwise. Updated exams, doctors' testimonies, inconsistencies in previous reports. Everything set up a clear picture. The judge was direct. He ordered the full reimbursement of the donations collected. The amount was absurd. Money she had already used. Travel, clothes, new furniture, everything I used to pretend a parallel reality. Evelyn left the courtroom to booze and cameras, and I remained silent. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because what I felt was bigger than words. Meanwhile, Caleb was receiving his own sentence. The investors banded together and hired a Chicago law firm that specializes in corporate fraud. People who don't play. They didn't come for revenge, they came for justice. And for every penny, Caleb tried to negotiate. He sent emails, asked for meetings. He meant that he was badly advised, that he believed in the project, that there were flaws, but not bad faith. But no one believed it anymore. The evidence was many. The pattern was clear. The scam was designed with too much detail to look like a stumble. And Rachel, well, Rachel didn't stay to see the ending. He took little Oliver and returned to his parents' house in Omaha. He left a simple note on the fridge. "This is not what we promised. I will take care of our son with the dignity he deserves." And he left. Caleb stood there, surrounded by empty boxes, blocked accounts, lawyers knocking on the door. The apartment that was once full of glitz, smells of expensive wine and rehearsed laughter, now smelled of abandonment. Each piece of furniture resembled a mistake. Each picture on the wall, a lie told too loudly. And he, who spent 2 decades seeing me as the failure of the family, now he looked around and saw that the real failure was someone else. It wasn't the man who walked around, who fed squirrels in the park, who read used books in the library. He was the man who abandoned all that was true for a theater that did not last until the third act. I'm not going to lie. Part of me wanted to take pleasure in knowing that. I wanted to laugh, to say, I told you so. But what I felt, it was empty. A calm, old emptiness, as if that story had ended without fireworks, without an audience, without victory. Only the truth standing, even after everything collapsed. And then, 2 days later, a timid knock echoed through my door. Short, almost insecure. I got up slowly, thinking it was another wrong delivery or a neighbor in need of salt. But when I opened it, there he was. Oliver. 10 years. Brown eyes, hands in pockets, and on the shoulders, Batman's blue backpack. He looked at me for a long moment, then said in a small voice, My mother said I could spend a few days here. She trusts in you. And I froze. Have you ever felt time stop for a few seconds? As if everything around disappeared and only what really matters remained? Well, that's what I felt at that moment. But what he carried in his backpack, it was even more unexpected. Can you guess what it was? Oliver entered slowly, as if he knows that silence weighs more than noise. The blue backpack on his back swayed with his shy steps. I made room without saying anything. I just let him cross the door. He stopped on the carpet at the entrance, looked around and said, My mother said this is a safe place. And then, with a small gesture, he took out of his backpack an old notebook with a black cover. She said, This is yours. I picked up the notebook carefully. It was my old financial diary, the one I used when I started investing in the early 2000s. Inside, scribbles about real estate, renovations, simple handmade accounts, and also personal notes, the kind we write just so we don't go crazy, like the time I sold my car to finish a renovation, or the day I slept on the floor of the house I was repairing, without a bed, without light, with only a blanket. She had kept it all, Rachel, and now, I put in the hands of my grandson what was perhaps the only possible bridge between me and the past that I tried so hard to hide. I made him a hot chocolate. We cut bread with butter. We don't talk much. But the silence between us was different. A silence full of possibility, no longer of absence. In the evening I prepared the guest room, and when I covered him with the blue duvet, he looked at me with those big eyes and said, My father said that you are stronger than you look. I took a deep breath. Did he say that? He did. Yesterday. On the phone. The next day, while Oliver was sleeping, the phone rang. It was early, even before the sun rose. I recognized the number. Answered. And I heard a voice that hadn't called me father for 20 years. Caleb. It wasn't the voice it was before. He had lost his arrogant tone, that way of a stage salesman. It was a lower voice, more cautious. I know that I have no right to ask for anything, but I just wanted to thank you. Silence. He continued. I read everything. What you have built, what he kept, the way he acted. I thought that success was a car, it was a trip, it was a stage. Now I'm starting to think that success is silence, it's sleeping in peace. I heard. Quiet. Her heart was beating slowly as if she was trying to understand if it was real. I'm not calling to ask for money, not a favor, just to say that I feel ashamed. And that, even so, you tried, even though I knew who I was. I don't know what he expected me to say, but my answer came short. It's still winter. Wait for the ice to melt. If it's to talk, let it be with the ground firm under your feet. And I hung up. It was not a yes. It wasn't a no either, but it was more than he had from me in 20 years. Look, there are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. If this story is playing inside you, enjoy this video and subscribe here to the channel. Let's make this conversation reach those who need it, because there is silence that is only broken when we share. And speaking of broken silence, 3 days later I received a letter, handwritten, in a crumpled envelope. But the sender was the one I least expected. Do you know who it was? It was hers, Evelyn, the woman I once called my wife, who one day slept next to me and then turned her face when it all fell apart. The lyrics were the same, firm, hurried, as if the words needed to come out before regret hit. I opened slowly. The letter smelled of cheap cologne and pent-up anger. Harold, it began, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to hate me either, but you won. Not the way I thought, but it won. Everything I built collapsed. And the cruelest thing is to know that you knew. And yet he did not scream. You just waited. I closed the letter and put it away. Not because he wanted to forget, but because there was nothing left to be answered. That woman belonged to another time. And I needed to finally move on. The next day I put on my most shabby coat, put on my boots, and walked to the municipal library. On the bulletin board, there was a new poster. Volunteers needed for adult literacy. NGO Esperanza. I tore out a small piece with the contact number and carried it in my pocket, without really knowing why. A week later, I was already with a group of 6 adults sitting in front of me, with notebooks open and eyes lit. They were immigrants, people coming from Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, people marked by escapes, losses, forced new beginnings. And yet, there they were, wanting to learn to write their own name with dignity. Sitting there, explaining the sound of the B and the P, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades. Presence. It wasn't about me, it was about them. It was about being there with truth. No, there are things that we spend our lives looking for outside. Recognition, value, importance, when all this may be in simply helping someone read a bus sign without depending on anyone. If you're still there listening to me, I'll tell you, stay with me until the end, because the most memorable moment is yet to come. And maybe it's yours too. I started going every week. I took books, word games, simple recipes for us to read aloud. They told stories of childhood, of losses, of loves that were left behind. And I told little, but I heard everything. And the more I listened, the more I felt that my life, even wounded, could still be stitched together with others. Over time, I started driving. I packed my bags, took my old Ford Fusion, and went to see the roads. I passed through small towns, some with names that sounded like old stories. Broken Bow, Red Cloud, Valentine. In each one, I stopped at a cafe, started a conversation with someone at the cashier, asked about the weather. Nobody knew who I was. And that was liberating. He didn't talk about money, nor Caleb, nor of the past. I listened, and let the world speak for a while. At one of these stops, in a little roadside shop, a man said to me, "You know, sometimes we just need someone to listen without judging." I shook my head and replied, "And sometimes, we need to be that someone." My phone kept ringing from time to time. Caleb left short messages saying that he was trying, that he started therapy, that he looked for a real job. I listened to everything, but I didn't return, not out of revenge, but because this time, I had chosen to prioritize my peace. Now I no longer looked forward to Christmas with anguish, nor birthdays, nor the dates that once broke me, because the truth is that, when we start to choose ourselves, the world stops being a weight and becomes a path. And it was on one of these trips in a coffee shop in Des Moines that I received an unexpected envelope, a yellow envelope with a childish drawing in the corner. It was Oliver's, and inside, a handwritten invitation with colored pencils. "Grandpa Harold, we're going to have a presentation at school. I'm going to sing. I really wanted you to go." And that's when I knew, maybe fate still had one last arrangement to make. Was I ready to open again a door that I spent my life learning to keep closed? I opened that envelope as if holding a memory about to be born. It was light, barely glued, the paper crumpled at the edges, as if it had been folded in a hurry by small hands. Inside, a sheet of notebook carefully torn off, the crooked blue lines, the fine print, with mistakes that only make the heart understand deeper. "Hi, Grandpa. Are you okay?" "I'm fine. I remember you talking about the story of the man who cleaned houses. I want to learn, I want to help." In the corner, a drawing. Me and him, under a roof, with hammers in our hands, and a squirrel watching everything from the top of a tree. And it was there, right there, that my soul, hard from so many winters, gave way, cried. For the first time in a long time, I cried without anger, without shame, without that desire to swallow the pain before it drains. I cried because that boy with a pencil and a memory touched a place inside me that even I didn't know still existed. It wasn't about forgiveness, nor about reconciliation. It was just about pure affection, about will, about the type of bond that is not imposed, it is built, slowly, with truth. That night I sat on the porch of the lodge where I was staying, in Emporia, Kansas. The wind was blowing strongly, carrying the smell of wet wood and fresh paint from the school we were helping to renovate. I took an old map of the city, drew by hand a simple path, from the bus stop to the school. I wrote on the back, "Oliver, I'm here. If one day you want to see what it's like to raise a wall with your bare hands, I'll show you. You don't need to come. But if it comes, I'll be around." I didn't put a date. I didn't make an invitation. I just left the door ajar. Because I learned that the best visits are those that arrive without beating, but with the right heart. No, I've spent a lifetime trying to understand why certain things break, why people move away. Because love turns into silence, but maybe, perhaps some answers are not to be found, only felt. Perhaps instead of fixing the past, we should teach our people to build the future better. And it was there, sitting on that wooden porch with the sky gradually darkening and the map in hand, that I thought, will little Oliver really cross this bridge? Or will this note be just another souvenir kept in the shoebox of life? I returned to Lincoln on any given day, one of those that have no color or scheduled time. I parked my car in front of my old house and stood there, inside the vehicle, just watching. The white facade, the wooden gate that I nailed myself with my hands after a windstorm, the pine tree still crooked in the corner of the garden. Nothing had changed. And at the same time, everything was different. That house, which for so many years had been the scene of my silence and my pain, now seemed alone. A house, a place I had traversed, and no longer where I was trapped. I went down slowly. I ran my hand over the balcony railing as if greeting an old friend. The wood creaked the same. The smell of old paint still lived in the cracks of the door. But the weight, that old weight that I carried on my shoulders every time I crossed this gate, that one was gone. And that's when I realized I was no longer the man who was left. I was the man who stayed, and he stood up. I stopped on the sidewalk, and some neighbors passed by. Two waved. One of them, Mr. Martinez, said to me, "Mr. Harold, good to see you here." I smiled. No one mentioned scandals. No one commented on the newspapers. Nobody cared about money. They only said my name with respect. And that, for me, was worth more than any amount. Because I wasn't the one who ran after proving anything. I wasn't the one who screamed justice. I just showed it. I just went. I just stayed. There is one thing that time teaches us, even when it seems cruel. Dignity does not make noise, but echoes. And respect. Respect is not bought with fortune or fame. He cultivates himself in silence like someone who plants a garden in a field of stone. I went to the bench in the square where I used to sit after walks. I sat down slowly. A group of young people was playing ball further on. A lady was reading a book next to me, and I stayed there breathing. For the first time in a long time, there was no waiting. There was no longer that twinge of, will he call? Will they remember me? I didn't want to prove my worth anymore. I just wanted to live my peace. And she had finally arrived. Not because someone gave it to me, but because I chose to build. Perhaps this is what few understand about starting over. It is not erasing the past. It's walking with him without letting him push you. I didn't need forgiveness to continue, nor excuses. I just had to accept that some people don't accompany us on the road. And that's okay. Sometimes the greatest victory is not letting what they did to you become who you are. And as I watched the sun set behind the hill of Holmes Lake, a small shadow stood beside me. I didn't hear footsteps. I just felt it. I turned my face slowly. And there, with the same blue backpack on his back and the same shy way of looking, he was Oliver. With my heart pounding, I stood up. "Did you find the map?" I asked. He nodded his head and said quietly, "I came to learn how to fix roofs, Grandpa." And I knew in that instant that the peace I carried now, it was going to be passed on. But he did not come alone. Behind him, standing at the entrance to the square, was Caleb, with his head down, hands in pockets, and an expression I haven't seen since he was a boy. Was it possible, after all, to start over not only with the grandson, but also with the child? Caleb didn't say much that day. He just stood there, not knowing whether to take another step or go back to the car. I looked into his eyes for a long moment. There was no anger, nor pride, just a mature silence that sometimes speaks more than any speech. Oliver came to me, hugged me around the waist with that awkward way of a child who is still learning the weight of a gesture. And it was there, with the boy holding me, and his father trying to find a place between what we were and what we could be, that I understood. The story didn't need a perfect ending. I just needed real. Today I follow my road with a serene heart. I return to Emporia. I continue to help where I can. I continue to listen more than I speak. Caleb sent me a letter weeks later. long, honest. He did not ask for forgiveness. He only said that now he understood. Oliver comes to see me from time to time. He brings his notebooks, his drawings, his curious silence, and I teach slowly, as one erects a wall, but also how a heart is sustained. Evelyn. Well, Evelyn faced justice. He served a light sentence, paid what he owed, disappeared from the news. Rachel never gave any more signal, and that's okay. Some doors we close without locking. He just doesn't come back for them. In the end, the greatest wealth I have gained has not come from the lottery ticket. It came from myself, of the patience I had in not returning with hatred what I received with contempt, of the courage to continue without an audience, without scandalous revenge. I learned that the justice that really changes the world is the one that no one sees coming, but everyone feels it when it passes, and that it is not always made with noise. Sometimes, it is done with absence, with selective presence, with dignity. I didn't have to raise my voice, I just had to get up. If you have accompanied me here, I thank you, really. Sharing this part of my life wasn't easy, but maybe it will serve someone on the other side to remind you that time is cruel, yes, but it's also fair. What a wound that we respect, heals, and that life, even when it seems to have turned its back, can still surprise. If this piece of my story touched you, give me a hug in the form of a like. And if you want to come back for another coffee and hear more of these twists and turns that life gives, subscribe here to the channel. It helps me more than you think. And leave it here in the comments of which city you are watching me. It will be beautiful to see where the hearts that are in this space of listening and truth come from. Oh, and it activates the bell. That way you don't miss out when the coffee is brewed again. Don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story.